Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling Resisting the Fossil Fuel Trap, comma, Russian or otherwise, comma, requires sustained government fiscal support. So this commentary is about the general effort to of mostly European countries, but also anywhere throughout the world, any nation that is deciding for a combination of political reasons, narrow geopolitical reasons to punish the Russian government for its invasion of Ukraine, but also more importantly, in the long run, to become independent of fossil fuels because of the impending climate catastrophe that is breaking down around us as I speak and as you listen, or if you're listening. So anyway, this this addiction to fossil fuels, I'm calling it a fossil fuel trap in this title, but you could also call it an addiction. So, and it's not an addiction that it's a personal addiction. It's I mean, there's personal elements to it, but it's a social, infrastructural and technological lock-in upon using fossil fuels mostly as energy inputs, but also sometimes as fertilizers and in industrial processes to do work or create products that we want in our society. And so the general efforts in this area are often premised on an economic model that suggests that it's a matter of just sort of a moral decision-making process, or a moral political decision-making process where that is focused on the private sector more than government. Or if government is involved, government is only involved, for instance, in deciding to do an embargo, for instance, or in deciding to impose a sanction, in this case on Russia. But the idea that the government is integrally involved in the climate transition is something that anybody who thinks about it will realize this is true in detail. But in general, in rhetoric, it's something that is overlooked, partly because of soft climate denial, of essentially governments paying lip service to a climate crisis and our fossil fuel dependence, but and the problems that it causes, but not implementing programs that are serious about reducing and eliminating our fossil fuel dependence. And so anyway, this is a statement of fact, in my opinion, and in my observation of the last 40, 50 years of energy policy since the first gas crisis, or in the 1970s, that where governments implemented different policies related to energy, and they started to have energy ministers or departments of energy, as we developed one in the United States, to create the sense that there is a range of options in terms of energy, but somehow fossil fuels remain the dominant energy in the actual day-to-day life of developed nations and also developing nations. Obviously, much more important in developed nations because they consume much more energy, and especially energy per capita, but also just in general more energy And so they are using more fossil fuels. So so anyway, uh, we see various, and this is particularly sharply felt in Germany right now, because Germany, in the last 12 years, the last more than that years, but uh, the policy of the uh, German government has been to basically develop what they call Ostpolitik, which I mean that goes back a ways, but the part of Ostpolitik, as it's been realized, is to become dependent on gas and also oil uh, from Russia, and to have a cooperative relationship with Russia, a more cooperative relationship than, for instance, the U.S. has with Russia with regard to energy. U.S. is much more of a competitor globally because it's an extractive. We have a fossil fuel. We produce both oil and natural gas. Germany does really neither. Within its boundaries, it has a coal industry, but not a natural gas or oil industry of any size. I mean, in terms of the extraction of the product. So, so in any way, so Germany, seeing the atrocities of the Russian army in Ukraine, has extra incentive due to the history of Germany to become energy independent of Russia, not to feed the Russian war effort by buying its oil and gas. But it has an economy that is addicted to that. That is not only them, not only all of Europe has one, but Germany is really the leading economy in the European Union and also within the Eurozone in particular. And anyway, so the Eurozone has rules about fiscal policy and about government spending that are restrictive and that are based on earlier German ideas about money it's a hard money fetish. I mean, Germany is not alone in having a hard money fetish, but there's a particular implanted memory that the Germans have from the 1920s of the hyperinflation during the 1920s, that where they value the stability of the currency over any the stability of the value of the currency over any other goals of the central bank. And so the European Central Bank is really based on the German Central Bank, the earlier German Central Bank it's based in Frankfurt, where the German Central is basically a refashioning of that central bank for the Eurozone as a whole. And so, and Germany has dictated pretty much policy to other Eurozone countries, and among those policies are a limitation in deficit spending. And so, and the word deficit is I should probably do a video that's separate about the problems of using the word deficit. It doesn't really describe what deficit spending is, and it also has a negative connotation associated with it. But anyway, so in order for governments in the Eurozone and also outside the Eurozone, because they are related and they don't necessarily pursue, some countries who are not in the Eurozone want to join the Eurozone, and so they think of it as an advantage for trade, among other things, but they're not thinking about this deficit rule, or there are not many economists who warn about this deficit rule. The modern money theory or modern monetary theory economists do, and or also some other post-Keynesian economists do, because they have seen how that kind of hard money philosophy, how it impoverishes large sectors of a zone, economic zones, especially in the case of the Eurozone, those countries that are net importers, okay? And also the German working class themselves are being squeezed by the hard money fetish of the European Central Bank and of the German government, of the mostly right-wing German governments, or right of center. Now we have a left of center German government. It's unclear yet whether they can break with this tradition because it's so it's been such a constant throughout German history to be very, very afraid of hyperinflation, and therefore and falsely associating deficit spending with hyperinflation. So anyway, for Germany to undertake a very aggressive program of becoming independent of fossil fuels in general, but also Russian fossil fuels in particular, it would involve an upgrade of much of the public transportation system. It would involve electrifying those parts of the economy that are not electrified, include buildings and so forth and so on. It would involve a massive building retrofit program using, in my best recommendation would be using the German and Austrian, but mostly German created or invented standard of building that's called passive house or Passivhaus, and the retrofit standard called Enerfit, which is the retrofit version of the passive house. And the reason why this is so important for Germany and for any other heating dominated climate, or for that matter, air conditioning, any climate where energy is used, either electrical energy or gas directly, or to boil, to heat spaces, that the passive house standard builds into the structure of the building a very high level of air tightness, and also fresh air using a mechanical ventilation system, and also insulation levels are increased. And so this standard of energy efficiency is very critical for European countries to achieve in order for them to be able to use renewable energy during the winter. In particular, air conditioning in the summer is less of a problem because of the sun being higher in the sky. So anyway, so that there's a nadir in the winter of solar energy, not necessarily wind energy. So it's important that as many buildings as possible are retrofitted to a standard like Enerfit, or our new buildings are built to the passive house standard. And so that requires money, and this is where climate and energy commentators have overlooked the importance of the motive force of government fiscal policy, and therefore the politics and the ethics upon which that rests, to create the change that needs to happen for a climate transition. The Russian invasion of Ukraine creates this geopolitical crisis that should accelerate. I don't know if it will. It seems to be accelerating the hunt for fossil fuels in other places other than Russia, but it should accelerate the reduction of use of fossil fuels rapidly. And I think in ways also that involve conservation, not just energy efficiency, conservation being involving a certain level of doing without, okay, or creating solutions that are low energy solutions rather than just increasing the efficiency of particular devices. Biking, for instance, using an electric bike or biking rather than using a heavy car to move around where possible. So anyway, and that's a conservation measure more than an energy. There's energy efficiency involved in it, or there's energy saving involved in it, but it's a transition to a different cultural use of devices, and so and that's something that can happen very, very quickly, actually, and that is a government should be calling people to do this for a number of reasons, not just because of this current geopolitical crisis. So anyway, what climate and energy campaigners have not put into their models of society and models of energy change is this fiscal policy, the role of fiscal policy and the role of government in rapidly throwing its weight around in the economy, essentially throwing the weight of, I guess I'm using sort of a kinetic metaphor for people to understand that the weight of government can decide to sit on one economic sector and promote another economic sector, and can do it very rapidly, and they can do it even more so if they have the ability to run a deficit, or which is a bad word, do a net contribution, a bad word in the sense of it's not a descriptive word, it's not an accurate word, be able to put a net contribution of government to a particular sector with certain goals in mind, not willy-nilly and just sort of writing a check and just hoping something good happens out of it, but directing the economic transition, the energy transition. And this obviously means competing in terms of power, political power, with some corporations who want to maintain control over the energy and technology systems of their nation. And in the United States, we see this very clearly with the oil and gas industry, via, among other people, Joe Manchin, and the Republican Party overall, in keeping a lock on our energy policy, with some marginal improvements proposed by someone like Joe Biden, who nevertheless is those improvements are only at the pace of what large private concerns will allow. For instance, Joe Biden, is pro-electric car. He's talked about electric cars. He's been out there, and I mean, in this sense, he is a welcome contrast to Donald Trump. But electric cars are something that certain large American and also European and Japanese, to lesser extent, actually, strangely, concerns, corporations are seeing as basically, okay, well, this will be a fairly painless process for us to just sell electric vehicles rather than gas power or internal combustion vehicles. It will be, relatively speaking, so it's not a conservation measure that, for instance, saying like, well, no, you should leave your car at home most of the time and bike more, or I'm just putting this as one example of that. And I'm for electric vehicles. I think they're a good idea, but we can't. Everybody in the world can't own a large 4,000-pound electric car. and neither should we really. Or certainly, if you have one, maybe you would share it with other people, and you would use your electric bike or electric trike or whatever it is that your lighter weight vehicle that uses less lithium, less, of all the various rare earths and things like that go into, or not battery production, or in other words, conserving resources, among other things, to do right size the technological solution to the problem that you have, or to the work you want to have done. So anyway, all of this transition requires rulemaking by government, and also and dirigisme, or a directorship by government of the economy, that is something that neoliberal politicians and are shy of. They don't want to do this. They don't want to have that role of directing the economy. They don't propose it. They don't conceive of it. They think we have to incentivize and disincentivize things, which is, I'm for doing that as well. We need to incentivize and disincentivize, but also we need government to do dirigisme as well, and to create plans that are flexible, maybe, but based on experience, but to create a high-level plan, high-level being at a high abstraction level, that are shared with people, that are optimally democratically aired and co-constructed, but still orienting ourselves to plan to get off fossil fuels, to have the goal and to take steps in that direction, okay? And not to just assume that markets will, and the rolls of the dice and so forth and so on, and the play of commerce will get us to where we need to go. Experience has shown us that it doesn't do that. There are too many fairly expensive, not outrageously expensive, but fairly expensive investments that need to happen, that are not incentivized, that are not things that, we necessarily want a profit-making corporation doing and owning. For instance, large pieces of infrastructure like a high-speed rail system, or a supergrid, renewable energy supergrid that spans in the entire continent, or even across continents. But we need to plan these things. That kind of a structure needs to be designed and then planned, and also again, we would want public ownership, and not privately owned. So government officials and leaders need to step up and say, I'm for are taking over certain public goods and creating certain public goods because of the necessity to transition off fossil fuels. And there are fundamentalists, there are religious in the not necessarily in terms of a established religion, but there are economic fundamentalists who believe that is anathema to everything they learned in Economics 101, and it's inefficient and so forth and so on. And some of that has gotten, a lot of climate policy and energy policy has been built up on top of that. But that needs to change in order for us to take action rapidly. And obviously an emergency, declaring a climate emergency is one way to do that. But even beyond an emergency, the sense of tumbling into something in an emergency way, we need to plan to do it. So it's not just, under the threat of, it is an emergency, it's a long emergency, and the emergency will last for a decade or 2 decades, 15 years or something, whatever it is. So we need to start to think about it in a deliberate way and plan it. At the same time, we need to act very rapidly, as the word emergency suggests. So anyway, I'm trying, there are a number of different concepts that have flown around in this video, but I want to at least introduce this sense of government action and the money creation component of fiscal policy, the liquidity creation that enables the realization of plans and of designs of systems that need to be made to use renewable energy to power our society, to use natural energy, the natural renewable energy that we have, not the fossil energy that we've been using. So those, to make that happen, certain pieces of infrastructure need to be made. Anyway, I think I've already made this point. So, and it requires decision making on the part of political actors like us, like advocates, and also by politicians, to venture into this area and to conceive of this creative process but also science. It's based on scientific goals, or goals that are told to us that climate science says that we should be doing, but it's not, the actual methods are not dictated by the science. We need to use our technological understandings and our tools, and also our ethical understandings and our sense of what people are capable of doing and wanting to do, or to in terms of work, by the devices, so forth and so on. So anyway, all those things together, but the engine of it, one of the engines of it, is this fiscal policy, this creation, money creation, and also project creation and public good creation component that we can't overlook. We have to, and also using the concept of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal needs to have this component in it, and needs to be explicit in the Green New Deal. So anyway, I will probably return to this topic a number of times in the future. But I'm just putting it out there today. And please share your comments in the comments below. And also, please like the video if you are enjoying it. And also, please subscribe to Politics 2100 if you find the content interesting. Anyway, we'll see you in the next video.